Hi everybody, this is Logan Schaefer with Crash Course AP World History, and today I'm going to be talking about the French Revolution, which was very important. And some would even argue that it was, culturally speaking and in terms of advancing Enlightenment ideas, actually more important than the American Revolution on a global scale. The French Revolution started in the late 1700s with King Louis XVI, who a lot of the peasants believed was unfairly treating his populace by throwing these very lavish parties, even though the economy was tanking beneath him due to expensive wars in Americas and other places. Eventually, though, the economy in France was so bad that Louis XVI fired up the Estates General, which was the closest thing France had to a legislative body at the time. This, at this point, hadn't been summoned for over 100 years. It comprised of the first estate, the clergy of the Catholic Church, the second estate, the nobility and lords who owned land, and the third estate, which was basically everybody else, including the national bourgeoisie and the peasantry and serfs and all that. Obviously, he gave the three estates one vote, which was very unfair to the peasantry, giving a lot of advantages to the people who were his kind of cronies, which the members of the third estate did not take very kindly to. So they started the National Assembly, which was the first governing legislative body started entirely by a peasant population for basically the first time in the Western world. They originally had their own building, but Louis XVI shut off the building and then forced them to go to a tennis court where they took the famous tennis court oath. And then they wrote the Declarations of Rights of Man and Citizen, which, despite being admittedly sexist, was extremely progressive for the time in guaranteeing the rights for men regardless of class. Another thing that was interesting about the new contemporary French government made by the National Assembly was the fact that it was secular. It wasn't ruled or owned or endorsed by the Catholic Church, which was a very new idea at the time. In fact, they even switched off the Catholic Gregorian calendar into their own little revolutionary calendar, which admittedly didn't end up sticking for very long, but it was still really important that they were moving towards scientific secularism and away from religious fundamentalism, which was groundbreaking at the time to believe that God was not required in order to have a functioning state. The National Assembly at the time was still admittedly pretty moderate, even wanting Louis XVI to keep his job as monarch of France, but they wanted him to be a constitutional monarch with limited powers. However, there was a small radical section of the National Assembly called the Jacobin Club, headed by Maximilien Robespierre, who sought to destroy the king and the monarchy entirely in all of France, and they eventually grew and grew and grew in power. While this was happening, people were really getting sick of Louis XVI's lavish parties in the Palace of Versailles. So a bunch of women, known as the Women's March, marched to the Palace of Versailles and demanded that he move to Paris with the common people, which was, again, really groundbreaking that women joined together. This is unique from any sort of revolution, American, British, or otherwise. Eventually, though, the aforementioned Jacobin Club, headed by Maximilien Robespierre, took over the government and then started the Committee for Public Safety, which wasn't that public, and it was only a few members, and it wasn't really concerned with safety as much as it was concerned with killing literally everybody they disagreed with. If you criticized the government, you would be sent to the guillotine. If you were a member of the monarchy or the monarch itself, you were sent to the guillotine. Anything that they just deemed fit, you were sent to the guillotine. And the guillotine at the time was progressive in its own way, because executions used to be very barbaric and very, this ritualistic thing. But the guillotine was short, quick, and easy. No matter what class you were, gender you were, race you were, your head was chopped off and you were dead. This streak of continually killing thousands and thousands of French citizens was known as the Reign of Terror. And the Reign of Terror basically lasted until Maximilien Robespierre himself became a victim of his own medicine, being sent to the guillotine, which was pretty ironic at the time. While all this revolutionary fervor was happening across France, all of Europe was looking at itself like, these revolutionary ideas better not come here, or I'm going to have to kill everybody. So that's what they did to France. Basically, all of Europe joined in these coalition wars against France and against the Revolutionary Republic. And eventually, there was a general of the French army who had a rapid amount of success in these wars and had saved France's butt a number of times. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte became so popular that eventually he basically, like Julius Caesar, realized that he could just take over the government of France. And that's what he did. He took over the government of France and instituted basically a military dictatorship. Which is really ironic that for one of the most craziest and bloodiest and most revolutionary revolutions in world history to start and end with an absolute ruler. Despite this, though, Napoleon actually spread these Enlightenment ideas all across Europe in his conquests, where he went from Britain to Russia and all over. And these ideas definitely wouldn't have spread as far as they did without him, especially to places like Germany. Unlike the American Revolution, which was a distant colony and organized by other rich capitalists, the French Revolution was an internal rebellion organized by nobodies, a bunch of peasants who eventually rose into a revolutionary government. That was really unique at the time, and all the following revolutions of the next few centuries were directly inspired by the French Revolution. There's also the aspect of actual societal change. In the Americas, pre- and post-revolution society was basically the same. If you were poor, you were probably still poor. If you were rich, you were probably still rich. If you were a woman, you were still probably oppressed. And if you were a slave, you were still a slave. But in the French Revolution, if you were rich, there was a high likelihood that you were now middle class or guillotined. And if you were poor, there was a likelihood that you were now high class or guillotined. Unfortunately, women didn't get the same rights that men did during the French Revolution, but the French Revolution also abolished slavery, in France at least. And that ideas of not owning another human was, again, pretty revolutionary for the time, especially in the Americas. And these ideas that all men of all races and all class were equal under the law was totally new. These egalitarian ideas would probably not have been spread as far as it wasn't for the French Revolution and Napoleon. Oh, speaking of Napoleon, it's time for the open letter. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment today. Is the re-elect George W. Bush presidential deck. That seems totally unrelated. An open letter to Napoleon. Dear Napoleon, everybody says that you were short, but you were actually 5'4", which was considered average height at the time. Yeah, men used to be way shorter. The fact that you were short is just British propaganda. Not to mention, in terms of actual measurement, France was totally revolutionary because they came up with the metric unit, which literally everybody in America uses. Thank you for watching.